Hello, everybody. All right, Sam, do we want to get started or do we still want to
Abs.
wait?
I think we can kick things off, and we'll make sure to debrief anyone else who joins us about halfway. But thank you everyone for joining us today. This beautiful, bright, and or at least where I'm at, cloudy Tuesday afternoon. Again, for introductions, I'm Sam Fox. I'm the Director of Client Success here at Xenett. Grateful for all of you to join us here. If you're not familiar with himself already, the man, the myth, the legend, I'd love to introduce our founder and visionary, Hardik Mehta. Uh, Today's topic is simplifying your cleanup game. We're here to, keep going within the busy season itself, as we've discussed, right? Between those who prepare taxes and don't, a lot of the times we find ourselves deep within some cleanup projects. So I'd love to open the floor to Hardik to take off to see how we can simplify our cleanup game this tax season. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking time to join in today's webinar. Just to set the floor, like Sam briefly introduced me. I'm Hardik. I'm one of the founder at Xenett. Also an accountant, and we founded Xenett 4 years back. And the original motive to found Xenett was mainly to solve our own problems. So we started with one feature that was more about automating the review piece, like identifying errors and fixing it. But as we started onboarding more and more clients, we've been getting a lot of feedback, and today's and it is more on like helping with the close process, cleanup projects. So this is where we are. Quick housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar. So in case if you would like to share with your people who were not able to make it, you can do that. And if you guys have any questions during the webinar, feel free to leave in the chat. I'll be also making sure to review the chat on and off. But I do have my colleagues on the call who will be able to answer your questions as well. All right. So that's that. I already gave a brief introduction about me, but in today's webinar, this is what you will kind of learn. All we want to understand is whenever we get a cleanup project, how exactly you guys can pursue that, right? We can kind of get into the details of what are the steps involved, how do you design the action plan, in fact, how can Xenett help you in entire cleanup project. We will also touch base on some of the review checklists and guidelines that can help you have the smooth cleanup. All right. So that's more of an agenda for today's webinar. So like cleanup is certainly a kind of a pretty big project. So all we want to do is we want to kind of segregate into the different phases, right? So for me, I would just put it into these five main phases, right? So let's just say whenever I'm getting a cleanup project, let's just say I have a prospect who has just reached out to me for the cleanup work, right? Now, in this particular case, the very first thing that we have to do is to make sure that we create a health assessment. Like some people call it diagnostic review. I mean, whatever we call it, but it's more about reviewing the books, look at the things, and find out what are the issues as such, like what exactly need to be cleaned up. So, and in our language, we call it books health assessment. So, the moment we get, let's just say, access to accounting file, we create a report, and I'll kind of show you the report that we prepare internally. It's looks something like this. So, there is a cover, and this report we also share with our client, our prospect. This report talks about like there's a report overview, and then there's a diagnostic check summary. Like this is a very high level summary that we said with the client that hey, we scan your books. Basically we looks like, we feel like it's only 54% is kind of a health score that we give it to, based on the records that we have analyzed. We scanned about this many transactions, and total we found this many issues with your books. So this report gives a glimpse of all the different kinds of issues that exist in the books, right? So there is a summary here, and then for each of these issues at the top, we also put some sort of example. So to give you an example here, we are highlighting that, hey, you got some vendors with the negative balance, right? And we also put some findings, and then we also put our recommendation. And we also give examples of like, hey, these are the vendors showing the negative balance, which may not look right. It needs to be investigated, right? So this kind of report where we highlight all the different kinds of issues with the explanation and with the examples as well. So that way, like whenever we actually talk to client and kind of propose, let's just say some sort of fees for the cleanup, this can help us justify that as well. Like why, like let's just say based on this cleanup, let's just say if I think I'm gonna quote this client $2,000 for cleanup, having this report with the examples would certainly help me to convince the prospect as well. All right. So this is a report that we kind of created. Again, you can be as detailed as you want. I'm pretty sure you guys may have some sort of like a similar report in place, but this is a format that I wanted to show it to you that we prepare it. All right. So that's a kind of report. Now, this is where Xenett can also help you because many of these issues that you are saying here can easily be extracted from Xenett. So let's just say what we do in that particular case in Xenett, we would just come to the review points and then we would apply the whole date range, right? In this case, let's just say I'm just focusing on the 2024. So I have the whole date range selected. And then once I do that, and like, let me actually just do that for 2023. Once you select the date range, it will start putting together all the different kinds of issues that are there. So we can use this information and then put it into the report, right? And then we share that report with the client. So this is the first place where Xenett can help you identify all the different kinds of issues that are existing in the books. Okay. All right, taking you back to the presentation. So that's the first, very first step is to determine the health of the books. Okay. The second point immediately after that is that let's just say we share this report and we kind of move forward with the cleanup project. So in the second phase, it's more about creating a specific plan, like the specific task that need to be done as a part of the cleanup project, whatever the proposal is, and then we go after that. We also have a format that we personally follow. It's more about uh, listing down all the different things that are involved in the cleanup project, right? So like it all starts with, let's just say I need to match the tax return with the books numbers, right? I need to reconcile bank accounts because they are not done. Then we need to, let's just say, fix some of the issues like duplicate entries and all of it. Then we have some cleanup items on the balance sheet, which is accounts payable, and then we have other cleanup items like whatever it is, right? I'm pretty sure, I mean, you guys would have better clarity if you have looked at the QuickBooks file. But the point here is to create an action plan that defines that, hey, these are all the things that we'll be doing as a part of the cleanup. And we also communicate with the due date as well. Now, obviously, this due date will all depend on when exactly we get the information from the prospect. But this is more to communicate with the prospect that, hey, these are the tasks involved. This is when we expect to get this done. So that just helps define the timeline, how much or how many weeks it's gonna take. Okay. And then we communicate with the prospect, and then we talk about the all of other things like the proposal or payment, right? But having this action plan has really been helping us and also to a lot of our clients as well. Okay, so that is more of defining what exactly need to happen as a part of the cleanup project. All right. The third thing is that let's just say kind of moving forward with the cleanup project. So now the third thing is to start gathering information from the client. Okay. Now, what information would you need generally from your client in order for you to get started? Okay. So these are the main things that we would get started with. The first thing is we need to have the last file income tax return. so that we can then match the numbers with our books. So let's just say if the client has filed the tax return for 2023, we would request it so that we can then tie out the numbers of the tax return with the book. So that's one of the information that we would ask for. Access, the read-only access, that is what I would prefer if we are able to get the access, which is a read-only access to bank, credit card, loans. So again, I mean, since we will have access to balance sheet, we can know what bank accounts they have, what credit card accounts they have, so we can ask for. If again, if read-only access is not going to be possible, obviously we can request the statements. Again, in this case, I would prefer the Excel transactions in Excel as well, and I'll kind of talk about that as well, like why I would prefer that way. Okay, so basically by looking at balance sheet, whatever other things that we notice, let's just say if we notice Stripe or PayPal, or if we notice like this client uses some sort of billing system or point of sale system, so we will then ask for any sort of application access. Okay, and in case if there are any working files available, just in case if client has some prepared thing or accruals things from previous account or anything like that, we can always ask for that. Okay, so these are the primary information that we would need to get started with the cleanup. Okay, so that's that. And the phase four is execution, and this is a very very important phase, and because this is where the entire work is going to happen. Okay, so this phase four is something that will be deep diving. So let me actually take you to the like what exactly or how execution need to happen. Okay. So now, assuming that we have everything ready, and then we kind of ready to start working on the cleanup. So there's some of the key things that we would need to like be aware for the successful cleanup. Number one, obviously we need to understand what is the industry of the client's business. Like, I mean, as we understand, how is client getting revenue, or are they recording revenue? Is it a restaurant accounting or is it a hotel accounting? I think it's very very important to understand the nature of the client's business so that we can uh, record the things accordingly, right? Because whenever we, let's just say, have to record the transactions or reclassify transactions from one account to another, this is very very important. So obviously we need to make sure that we understand the nature of client's business. Second important point is, like when we say we need to do cleanup, we have to figure out the period for which we have to do the cleanup, right? The easiest thing to do here is that, like, the way I would approach this is that if I know that 2023, let's just say 2023 tax return has been filed, which means, like, I mean, we already have the reliable numbers. In that case, we will just use that as a base. We will adjust the balance accordingly in the books, and then we will start working on 2024. Okay, so I think this is very very important to find out, like, what period that for which we need to do the cleanup. One thing that we do here also is set up the expectation with the client, because obviously this is not like an easy process, not going to be the easy thing. So we just set up the expectation, and that is a main reason why we create that action plan, where we literally describe all the things that we're going to be doing along with the items, and then we also specifically mention that, hey, we will need this information from you in order for us to move forward from here. Because if there are any such things that if we don't get it on time, the entire project deadline will be delayed. So I think this is very very important to set the expectation ahead of time with the client, so that they know what is expected from them. Okay, and one of the things that would really help, and again this is based on my personal experience, which is setting up weekly meetings to review the progress and to discuss any roadblocks, right? So these are some of the key things I would suggest that would be great to have it even before we start the cleanup project. All right, perfect. All right, so the entire execution, I have now segregated into the main six parts. Okay, Number one is tie out the numbers with the tax return, right? The books numbers and the tax return reconciliation. Assuming that, let's just say, I have got the 2023 tax return with me, the very first thing that we should do is to make sure that our books is matched with the tax return so that we have a good opening numbers base, right? So that's like step number one. Now, one thing I also would like to clarify, guys, is that in this webinar, I mean, you know that we only have about 60 minutes. So again, I would not be able to literally cover like, hey, how to tie out the numbers with tax return, because that itself is a different process altogether. Similarly, each of these steps has got its own detailed process. So I'm not gonna literally touch base on uh, like every single process in detail, but the purpose of this is to mainly kind of have you guys an overview as to, okay, this is how cleanup project should be pursued, right? Maybe we'll have some other webinar other day where we can literally go into each of these points in specific, and we can talk about that as well. Okay, so the very first thing is tie out the numbers with the tax return, right? I think once that is done, at least we know that now we need to start worrying for only 2024 data, right? So once that is done, second thing we need to determine is that the completeness, right? So even before I start cleaning up 2024 numbers, we have to even first check, are the transactions been recorded already, are the banks are reconciled, the credit cards are reconciled, right? So the very first thing is to make sure the reconciliations are complete. If not, then that may mean that some of the transactions may not have even entered, right? So we need to make sure we record those transactions first, right? I have personally dealt with many clients who have not updated their books, like let's just say for a year or 2 year or 6 months or 8 months, like very long period, right? In that case, one of the best thing that I was personally doing was that, rather than, I mean, even when the bank feeds are connected, I would and if I have the access to bank account, I would prefer to export the transactions in Excel, would just convert it into an importable format. So let's just say if I have all the expenses here and all the deposits here, because it's very easy to code transactions inside Excel, and then we can just import the same Excel into Xenett using port as well. In QuickBooks using Xenett port, right? So one thing that have really helped us working with thousands of transactions, like, is simply to have them in Excel and then just simply code it, because it's pretty easy to code transactions. We can do the filter and grouping and all the different kinds of things, right? So in case this is what I personally prefer, like rather than going with the bank feed, because once we import those transactions, more like all these transactions would automatically be matched with the bank feed and we can simply accept it, right? So I think that is one of the easiest way that I have personally figured out whenever we find any transactions missing in the books. So that's that. And yeah, at this point, at step number two, our goal is to make sure that all the bank and credit card are reconciled properly. So at least at this point, we have made sure that all the transactions are recorded. Now, once all the transactions are recorded inside the QuickBooks file, okay, we can then worry about the most obvious issues. And when I say the most obvious issues, I would call it like, hey, if there are any uncategorized transactions, we want to make sure that we resolve them. If we don't have answer to that, we will just send it straight to the client. We'll start getting the feedback and we'll start resolving that, right? Similarly, and all of those issues can easily be found inside Xenett. I think you guys are already familiar who are using Xenett, obviously. So you can come here and then see all those issues. It's easier to fix it from here, and that's because of the bulk action feature that we have. So like if I notice that, hey, during the cleanup, I notice this many transactions are yet missing the name. In that case, if I have some sort of description with me, I can just start selecting them take bulk action, and then just simply reclassify it, right? So that's a number third point, which is more to fix the obvious issues. And when I say obvious issues, it's more about like all any such transactional issues. Okay. All right. I'm just gonna take a quick look at the chat just to see if there are any questions. Then I might just answer that. And Ritesh, you can also tell me in case there are any questions that you want me to answer during this presentation. Okay.
Sure thing.
All right. I think it's just the AI chat, so I think we are good to go. All right. All right. So that was the point number 3, where our focus is to review all those different kinds of issues and then make sure they are taken care. All right. Once that is done, all right. Which is the resolved transactional issue, which is third point. The fourth point is to now start reviewing balance sheet and profit and loss accounts, right? And again, this is also going to be very, very deep, because as we start reviewing balance sheet and profit and loss, because each account need to be understood and each account need to be reviewed accordingly, right? So this is where, like, as we understand the nature of business, it's going to be very, very helpful. Now, when we are reviewing balance sheet, these are the most common things that we need to make sure that we pay attention to. Okay. So whenever we are looking at balance sheet, the very first thing is obviously the cash and bank accounts. We need to make sure if the banks are reconciled, which is fine, but then if there are any unclear transactions, those need to be reviewed to make sure that these are the genuine unclear transactions and are supposed to get cleared in the future period, right? And I think this is where Xenett can also help you with the review point, where you can like easily pull up the unreconciled entries, quickly review them, and see like if any of them do not look genuine, right? So we even have some sort of flags that, hey, you got some 2022 entries that are not clear. So again, at this point, we need to make sure that if there are any unclear transactions for the previous years or like that, we need to make sure that we take care of that, right? So like as a part of the bank accounts, that's number one thing that we need to make sure that we have the genuine unclear transactions. Okay. Now, as we are speaking about the cash and bank, we'll also talk about the undeposited funds. So our expectation for undeposited funds would be to have the accurate balance as of the year end date, which is, let's just say, December 31st, 2024. We need to make sure that it should only have this much balance that is supposed to get cleared in the next month. Okay. And for that, we also have the undeposited funds review balance, where it can easily pull up all those transactions that make up the balance for that. So for example, in this case, I do see that there is a deposit of 2100, which is not deposited, right? So I can then find out like, hey, whether this is deposited afterwards or like all we need to do is then start investigating like whether this looks genuine, not genuine, and then we have to take the appropriate action. Okay. So one of the other thing that we also do is that as we are doing all this cleanup, wherever necessary, we will start putting together some sort of notes, like right next to the, just a second, I'm just gonna disable some of the columns. So like along with that, as we are fixing things, like let's just say unclear transactions or whatever it is, we'll also start putting together some sort of notes or the screenshot or any working paper. So that way, whenever we are handing over like this project, like at least we can justify all these numbers. Like when we say we have cleaned up the books, if it is supported by any supporting documents, would be really great. So that's another practice that we follow, that hey, this account is totally fine, good to go. And here is where you can find the attachment. Okay, that's that. So these are all again, I'm not sure I'll be able to go through any like all of those points into the detail, but I think you guys know that all of these things need to be reviewed properly. And for that, we actually have a detailed checklist, which I believe whoever are using Xenett already know what that checklist look like. But this is a very, very detailed thing. Like whenever you review, like just say a merchant clearing account, these are the things that you should pay attention to. So I think having some sort of checklist, whatever you guys are following, is very, very helpful just to make sure that we are not missing out on any important points, right? This is a very, very standard one. I mean, depends on what your client's business could be. I mean, you may have a different checklist for that, but I think this is account receivable as a whole. These are the things that you have to pay attention to. If you have a prepaid expenses, these are the things that you have to pay attention to, right? Similarly for fixed assets, similarly for other assets, right? So there's a detailed checklist that we already have it that we follow. Some of the points from here we can touch base with, which is, let's just say, if we had to make sure that accounts receivable is cleaned up, how do you say that your account receivable numbers are accurate, right? To do that, there are some points that we have to review and make sure that those are taken care. First of all, if there are any unapplied payments on your aging report, you want to make sure that they are like why they are unapplied. They should have been applied to the proper invoices. Okay. Is there any customers with a negative balance, then we also have to find out like why it is negative. Okay. If there are any customers, let's just say with some negligible balances like 0.50 or $1, we can check with client and we can make sure that, okay, hey, if it is a very small amount, we can just write it off. Similarly, if there are any customers showing overdue balances, we can always check with the client. And if we think it's no longer going to be recoverable, we can consider writing it off as well by consulting with the client. And lastly, if there are any customers showing zero balances, which means that the payment, I mean, the invoices and payments may not have been applied. So in that case, we'll have to make sure that those are applied properly. Similarly, we can review the accounts payable and all of the different categories. So again, not be able to go through all of those things in detail, but I was just trying to give you some idea to follow some checklist. So that way, by following that checklist, we can make sure that accounts payable, it's all good. Accounts payable, it's like all verified if we follow this checklist. All right. So that's that. So we want to make sure that we literally review each balance sheet accounts and make sure all the accounts show the accurate picture. Okay. So that's on balance sheet side. Now, the review of profit and loss and balance sheet, review of profit and loss accounts. Now, again, all we do is that, like, let's just say if we start from the revenue, we need to understand how clients is recording revenue. So one of the things that I would check is that if I see that clients is in more of a services business and the revenue is actually recorded by creating invoices, then my expectation would be that if I see the revenues are created through invoices, I would not expect any deposits or sales receipt recorded directly to the income accounts, right? Because that might mean that it could be a payment towards invoice, correct? So I think there are some patterns that we have to understand by looking at the revenue, like okay, how the revenue is recorded. Similarly, if I see that the revenues are generally, let's just say, uh, some sort of retail industries like restaurants or hotels where there's a point of sale system and revenue is recorded by some general entries, then again my expectation would be that we can also match the revenue with point of sale system, or let's just say if there are any such other billing system involved, then we want to make sure that the revenue numbers are that way reconciled. Okay, so that's one of the checkpoints that we can have it. Inside revenue, another thing that we check is that like what are the debit entries. So like you see debit entries on income, because generally you, and we also have a review points for inside Xenett for that. So what it does is that if there are any debit entries inside the revenue accounts, it can easily pull up. Okay. The idea behind that is that sometimes mistakenly, if someone has recorded, let's just say, bills or expenses or anything like that, it can easily pull up, because you generally would not expect revenue to have debit entries. So at least you have a quick look at it just to see, okay, these are the legitimate transactions and you should be good to go. Okay. So that's that. Now, on expenses side, like when I say expenses, it would also cover cost of goods sold as well as expenses as well. There are plenty of other things that we have to check. Okay. The very first thing is to make sure the, because okay, here is where I notice that most times there is an issue with the chart of accounts, because the transactions or other, I would say, uh, like some accounts should have been created as cost of services or cost of sales, have actually been created as expense account, right? So those things, again, we do have a separate point for that, which is also looking at the chart of accounts and fixing it. But that's one of the common thing that I personally notice, where the like something that should have been above gross profit was actually below it, right? So basically we also need to make sure that we pay attention to that. With the expenses side, the major thing that we have to pay attention is the categorization issues, right? For that, I think you can actually use this review point, that is GL consistency review. And this is, I used to spend a lot of time exporting the whole general ledger into the Excel file and then manually looking at it. So I think this is very, very handy, where you can quickly scan through how all the transactions have been coded across the entire year. And if you notice that something is not coded correctly, you can just fix it from here. So in this case, let's just say you think that, hey, in this vendor it doesn't make sense, travel mills, right? You can just click here and say reclassify entry, and you think that, hey, this should go to job supplies. You click on it, reclassified, in the entire year's transactions would be reclassified within seconds, right? So I think this is one of the I would say uh, not easiest, but like I would say, like it would actually cover majority of the profit and loss issues inside this review point itself, right? So it's pretty important that you look at how all of your transactions have been coded, and you can fix them as needed. So that's one way I look at things. The another way I also look at this is like by GL, because now this also gives me another perspective as to which account has what, right? So it's like I see dues and subscription. I can quickly see everything inside dues and subscription. Because imagine if I'm looking at the whole ledger of dues and subscription, and there are probably 100, 200, 300 transactions, it could be very, very difficult to find out what's wrong in there. Instead, if I'm just looking at this kind of summary, this straightforward tells me if something should be there or not. So in this case, I see there's T-Mobile in dues and subscription may not make sense, or ADP in here may not make sense. I can quickly pull up the transactions and start fixing it from here, right? So I think most of the issues can easily be resolved with these two views, like by PE and by GL, right? So that's a major thing to pay attention to, like whenever we are reviewing profit and loss. The another thing is uh, the amount consistencies. Okay. Now, when I say amount consistency, what we do is that with the profit and loss, let's just say, I mean, you have it by month, you can just start seeing, because once the things have been categorized properly, you can then start looking at the numbers by month. Even you can compare with the previous year, and just to see if there is something obviously, like obviously off when compared with the previous month or previous year. you can then start paying attention to them, and then you can start fixing it accordingly. Okay, so that's that. Okay, I think 2019. I think we'll have to change the period here. But anyways, I think you got the point. So all we have to make sure is that the profit and loss, it's just not the categorization, but like if something is inconsistent with the amount, we can always check like, hey, if something is missing, or if that might also tell us if we need to accrue any of the expenses as well. Okay, perfect. So that's that. Um, as we are reviewing profit and loss, again, this amount like review transactions more than $10,000, that amount could be different, depends on what kind of industry or what kind of client it is. But I think you can review those, you can quickly pull up the transactions. Let's just say, hey, anything that is more than 5K in expenses side, I want to see them, because that gives some idea as to, I mean, if the transactions need to be capitalized, like if, whether it's a prepaid expenses, whether it's an asset purchases, so that can easily help us as well, right? So it's pretty straightforward. Again, if you are using Xenett, in that case, it's pretty straightforward, where you can just type in the amount and it can easily pull up the transactions if there are any. Okay, and then you can review those transactions, and then you can decide whether you want to leave it as is, as an expense, or you want to capitalize it or make the prepared adjustments. Okay, all right, so that's that. Just like that, some accounts like possible prepared entries. So some accounts you would want to review, like uh, especially software subscription, sometimes insurance, sometimes rent, just to see if there are any big payments that were made for a longer period. Then you want to make sure that you can actually make the prepared adjustments accordingly, right? So again, you can identify those accounts, and then you can review them, and just to see if there are any such thing, then you can make the entries accordingly. Same way, some accounts on profit and loss, like office supplies sometimes, or equipment, or repairs and maintenance, even car repairs, things like that, you can always see. And then if you think it's bigger, like the amounts are bigger, then you can always think of capitalizing them as well. Okay, it's that. So I think this is more or less, I think, covered when it comes to profit and loss. One thing I have not mentioned here is, but like it's more of a payroll, right? We want to make sure that whatever the payroll that we have it on profit and loss, we also tie with the payroll reports, just to make sure it's recorded correctly. And even that will also automatically cover that even the our payroll liability also show the right picture. So payroll is altogether a different thing, but the point is that we also reconcile the entire payroll with the payroll reports, so that we make sure that the expenses are recorded correctly, and our payroll liabilities on the balance sheet also show the right picture. Okay, so that majorly covers the profit and loss as well. Okay, now assume that we have uh, reviewed the balance sheet accounts, and then we kind of made sure all the accounts are cleaned up properly, we don't have any questions, and then we also reviewed profit and loss accounts, the numbers are right. I think then the other thing, which may not really impact the numbers as such, but it's more of the presentation of the financial statements. So number one is the restructuring of the chart of accounts, right? Now this is very, very important, where during the, and again, before restructuring the chart of accounts, we generally do, what we generally do, or should do rather, is that we actually create a proposed chart of accounts, that hey, based on our expertise or our experience, this is what the chart of accounts look like for your business. And then we, once we get the approval from the client, we can then start changing the account. So that means that we'll have to start mapping the accounts, the existing accounts and the new accounts. We start mapping them, and we start merging or whatever. Like if we need to reclassify it, we reclassify the transactions. If we need to merge the accounts, we merge those accounts as well, right? But this is very, very important piece, because if the chart of accounts are not set up right, I think it might just be misrepresented, right? So it's pretty important. So that's the last thing that we do, which is chart of accounts. The other thing, again, this may not really impact the numbers as such, but review the vendors, customers, items list, and we also like inactive, the like make the inactive, like the ones that have not been used since years. We do have a review point that talks about that, which is a review list. I think that makes it super handy. So let me just see if I have here. Okay, review dormant records. I think this was the one, right? So in this case, all it helps you to find is all those vendors or customers. In fact, everything like accounts and employees and class and locations and items and everything. So as we are anyway cleaning up the financials data, it's also a good idea to even clean this up as well. So in this case, if you notice all these vendors have not been used for a while, you can just start them in. So at least you have a fresh data to follow for the future years, right? So that's also another activity that we do. All right. So that's that. I think the entire thing, I'm pretty sure you guys would be doing it one way or another. What has personally worked for me, because I have personally dealt with so many cleanup projects for so many different industry clients. I think one of the major things that has really helped me personally was having a solid action plan, having regular meetings with the clients and reviewing things, and then also discuss about any roadblocks, right? I think if that happens, because even as we are doing the cleanup, there might be a lot of questions that we need answers from, right? So those meetings have really expedited the entire cleanup project as a whole, right? So I think these are some of the best practices that we wanted to share with you guys. Again, like the idea was to at least talk about the approach uh, that we should have towards the cleanup project. This is not like I mean, obviously, we did not have that much time to get into the fact of like how to review uncleared transactions or unreported fund, but at least we may have some other time to talk those things. But for now, we just wanted to share with you guys what should be the approach towards the cleanup project. All right. So that's pretty much it from my end. But I would now like to actually I mean, in case if you would like to talk about, first of all, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. If you would like to share your experience that, hey, this is what we follow, or this is something, or in case if you want me to cover any specific situations that you have come across, I'll be happy to do that as well. Okay. In fact, I'm also gonna, I think the mics are disabled. So in case if any of you wanted to enable the mic and speak, you can do that. You can do that. So let me just see. All right. Meanwhile, any questions from anyone, guys?
Yeah, Hardik.
Yep. Hey, Mike. Yep.
The re I missed where you got the report to present to the client before the cleanup starts. Can you
Okay.
show where that is?
So yeah, actually that report right now, Mike, is actually was manually created. It's not created from Xenett, but that is where we are heading towards, where like we very soon have that feature where in case if you wanted to generate the similar report out of Xenett, you would be able to do that, and you can then share with your client or prospect, whoever it is. So
Okay, great. All right. Thank you.
yeah, yeah.
We have a hand from
Can you
Kim.
share an example of, can you send us an example of that report? So if we wanted to mimic it, we could.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. We will just I mean, along with the resources, we will certainly share that sample report as well. Sure. And Kim, we will also share that close year-end template with you as well. So yeah, that will also be shared as a part of the resource kit as well. All right, guys. Any of you who guys have already been doing such cleanup, have you guys been finding it relevant, not relevant, or anything that you were doing that I have not covered? So again, any feedback or anything?
It'd be great if we could send out the W-9s before we go and pay them.
Okay.
So kind of like preemptively, if that makes sense, instead of after the fact. That 1099 feature is awesome. It rocks. But if we could do it beforehand, it would be even better.
Okay, got it, got it. Absolutely, Kim. I mean, so at this point, as a part of the cleanup project, we were anyway doing after the fact. But I do get the point where, let's just say, if we have to do the regular bookkeeping, it totally makes sense. So, yes, Marlon, if you can please come forward.
I just wanted to give 2 cents, and I don't know how many people here already use Xenett versus not use it, but it's honestly, like, when it comes to the accounting side, my absolutely favorite tool that I have ever used. Coincidentally, I did make the decision recently to kind of step back on the accounting side and focus more on tax, but I still keep and use Xenett because it just helps me help my clients keep their files cleaner, which makes my job on the tax side even easier. So if there's anyone here who doesn't use Xenett already, 100%, you have to. There is nothing that makes accounting cleanup simpler. I absolutely love it. As far as the W-9s go, I get what the last person just said, and coincidentally, I was just going through this in my season. Of course, the problem with that is it's not really on there's nothing you can do on the Xenett side aside from you have to get the vendor in there before actually issuing a payment. That's the only way to do it, is to put the vendor in to request the W-9. That's about the only way to do that as far as I know. But that's
well,
it.
if you're in QuickBooks and you're creating an accounts payable, that's going to show up on your work in process inside Xenett. So you would automatically be looking at that AP on a regular basis. And before you pay it, we can see that we don't have a W-9, or in my case, I do construction. So I can see I don't have a certificate of insurance that's connected to that accounts payable. I can immediately say, whoop, stop the process. You're not getting paid. I need that W-9. And we can email it right out.
Yeah, and part of that process is you just have to have the process in place to get them in beforehand. We know how many clients just issue a payment and then we only find out about it after the fact, but that's a whole different ball game. No, I just wanted to give my 2 cents. That was it.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Love you.
Thank you, Marlon. All right. I think Sam looks like also looked at the chat real quick. I think all the questions have been answered. So
Excellent. Well, without any other questions, please feel free to ask. But I wanted to thank you all for attending. We had a great crowd today, one of our best yet. So I want to thank you for attending today. After the call, we will be issuing out links with recordings of this meeting, presentation slides as well. In addition to that, we'll be also featuring a survey on this output. We value your feedback more than anything. Obviously, we have some raving fans of Xenett, so your feedback is more essential than it ever has been in this next turning point, 2025, as we develop new features and continue to improve our process to making you guys happy. We please ask that you would leave your input with that, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Thank you so much, and take care.
thank you, guys. Thank you for taking time. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Take care.